I don't get this at all. 408, Willard, Hector is not paid to be the manager. Vitello is rightfully on the hot seat. Stop deflecting. A, not deflecting. B, no, he's not on the hot seat. And C, why on earth would you, and again, I'm not even going to say defend the person, why would you defend the outcomes that are happening at third base? Nobody blames Tony Vitello for Hector Borg's wheeling left arm, right?
If they have a philosophy of we're going to be aggressive, and yesterday they were more aggressive on the bases than they have been. First time all year, they stole multiple bases in a single game. So I don't know if they are like specifically trying to be more aggressive on the bases.
But aggression and stupidity are two very, that doesn't mean just go no matter what.
I agree with you, but it might be something that they've talked about and something that they actually want to do. And so Hector Borg is over there thinking, we want to be aggressive, and I'll show you aggressive.
Yeah, but you know what's funny to me? Like people, and some people do this at different levels. You'll say that the manager is accountable for the product, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then when something is happening out on the field that is clearly subpar with the product, don't you want the manager to do something? If you're holding Tony Vitello responsible for what's happening on the field, then I would say, great, let's give him the responsibility. And please reassign Hector Borg, especially now that I know, based on hearing your words earlier today, you kind of sound like you want to. Now, that's me. That's me putting my judgment into it. But he kind of sounded like he wanted to. Don't you think? Didn't those words sound like that to you?
Somewhat. Yeah, I mean, all the things he said have been about, base running and Adames, and he hasn't really called him out, nor does he have to, nor will he, I don't think. But he could make the move now. He could give him a few more shots to try to right the ship, or he can do things how he wants to do it. Organizationally, they might make the call, and we're going to find out tomorrow who's out there in the third base coach's box. But there's a certain amount of, value and loyalty if you're Tony Vitello. And if you think that, things have been bad, but if you think that it can be saved, or you want to show that you can be loyal to a guy who is equally new at his job as you are,
right? There's
a thought that you might give him a few more chances.
Okay. Does this change your thought on it at all? And by the way, I know that we're zeroing in on this one thing. Obviously, the Giants, if you just go, okay, write down all their problems. It's like, well, I'll see you tomorrow. It's going to take me a while to write all of that down. But this is the one that's just at the top of my mind today. And I think that that's fair after what we saw yesterday. Tony was also asked today about the decision to make Borg the third base coach in the first place. Try this on for size.
Yep.
Listen to this answer. During the meetings we had at Oracle Park, his name came up as a guy down in the organization who some would truly be disappointed if for some reason he bounced to another organization. There are guys who switch for various reasons, and sometimes if they're even moving for a lateral position, if there's permission, you can lose a guy. So that was kind of the origin of it. The first time I was able to meet him in person was spring training. Okay, he completely just washed his hands of that decision. And this is what I am feeling today. I said yesterday that it does not feel like the right hand and the left hand are working together. I went to bed, I woke up, I feel it even more today. Zach Minasian is with Jim Bowden saying, the lineup is Tony's call. Now here we got the third base coach. Tony's like, well, that was the organization's call. Organization didn't want to lose him, so they brought him to me in spring training. I met him and said, sure. I just, it does not feel like you've got a group that's working together here. And that, to me, is a very big core piece of why we're watching what we're watching on the baseball field. This is starting to feel very much like the Golden State Warrior team after Jordan Poole got punched, which is like, okay, you're able to do some things, But remember that team couldn't win a road game?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, why can't you win a road game? Well, we found out later that something was rotten to the core from the inside out.
Yep.
I don't know. That was easy to figure out what it was that was rotten to the core. This one's much more complex, but we should not have this many quotes that are sort of like, yeah, go talk to that guy over there. I don't know why, I don't know why Hector Borg's the third base coach.
Well, here's a quote from February. I don't know who's
making the lineup.
I talked about this yesterday, the Pavlovich article, NBC Sports Bay Area, and Minasian's quoted, and he says, quote, I can remember getting off the Zoom, and I don't even know if it was 5 seconds, and Tony was like, can we hire that guy? So that's Minasian saying that Tony really wanted to hire that guy after the Zoom call, and then Tony says yesterday, didn't meet him till spring training, and the whole idea of, like, what's the flow of the things that are happening. So Tony gets hired, and it's not, all right, Tony, go out there and hire your staff. It's, all right, Tony, you're hired, and here's what we think about a third base coach, and there will be a Zoom tomorrow, and you'll get a chance to meet him on Zoom.
By the way, I don't even have any issue with any of this, but I have issue with it now. Like, it's not working. I don't know why this is, like, this doesn't, am I wrong? This doesn't feel difficult to me. This doesn't feel mean. It doesn't feel difficult, right? Like somebody just texted in, like, a guy just lost his grandma, you jerk. Yes, he just lost his grandma. I don't actually know what the hell that has to do with coaching third base. You know what I mean? Sorry. You know, like, I don't know why. That can't be relevant here. This is a $240 million payroll and a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you have got to have the respect of your fans. You have to have the respect of your players. Did it look to you like Willie Adames yesterday in the clubhouse? Did he respect the decision that Hector Borg made?
I don't think he was thrilled with it, no. Yeah. And if you go back to this article, Borg is quoted, and he says, I'm an aggressive third base coach. I've always been that way.
It's fine.
Vitello says, I think you'd rather err on the side of aggressive and then pull back. So maybe it's as easy as, all right, let's pull back before we remove Hector Borg because... Yeah, it's only been 56 games.
But this is not the first egregious error.
When he made an error where he wasn't as aggressive.
Exactly.
So
he's just flat out doing the wrong things over and over again. I don't know any other way to say this. We're all sitting here super bummed about the way the Giants are playing baseball, but y'all want to make no changes? That doesn't make any sense to me.
So well, I want to make changes, but I don't know if this change is going to be the really significant one that leads to more winning.
I'll buy that, but for me, it's not even about that. It's just the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
Well, I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not.
I believe very firmly it's the right thing to do. I believe there are those in the organization who believe it's the right thing to do. You know, there's different cultures that get built in businesses. To a degree, ours is similar. It's not the exact same, but you know this, like, people are not surprised in our business if you have a lack of performance that spans over a significant period of time, and that lack of performance is kind of pronounced. Like, it doesn't surprise you when you get called in.
It just depends on how long you're given and how bad you are.
Right. This is professional sports. If you had a guy shooting threes for the Warriors and he missed 40 in a row, you all would ask him to stop shooting threes. It's very A to B to me. And I get that not everybody's going to see that the same way, but this is a pronounced and prolonged period of poor decision-making.
2 months is prolonged?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yes.
I really don't. I don't see it that way.
I have never watched a baseball season in my life where there have been this many directed third base coach egregious errors.
Well, he hasn't had that many opportunities because you have the lowest on-base average in the history of the San Francisco Giants. And it's obviously exacerbated by the fact that you don't hit, you don't field, you don't win games. And because of that, we look at these errors and you're 12 games below, and we look at a guy who clearly is making mistakes as a third base coach, and it's worse because you're one of the worst teams in baseball.
There's no question about that, but I guess let me peel that onion a little bit. This isn't about blaming Hector for how bad the Giants are. It could be reason number 66. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be addressed. and it's an easy one to address. And his errors are consistent and egregious. They really are.
I mean, we highlight his errors, but we don't highlight when he makes a great call or the right call because it doesn't stand out.
There haven't been that many of them.
I'd have to go back through all 56 games or whatever. It's impossible to know.
Yeah, it's impossible to know.
We see the mistakes because they're obvious and they're mistakes.
Yeah, but then again, okay, let's do that with an offensive lineman. We don't sit here and go, okay, now go back through all of the snaps where he didn't give up a sack. If you're making too many errors, you're making too many egregious errors, and I find these to be egregious. There are different kinds of errors. I know some of you can rightfully bring up, hey, Willie Adames is leading the world in errors. I don't find his errors as egregious. I can only think of, in fact, one that I find to be an egregious mental error, which is when he forgot how many outs there were.
Yeah, I mean, errors are errors, and when you're a shortstop, your job is to make plays.
Absolutely.
And he's got 10 errors.
And those can all be accountable, but let's also not act like we're all coming from the same starting block. One of you makes $182 million over the next 6 years. The other one is 40 years old and just got put there for the first time in his life as third base coach.
Well, he's been a third base coach before.
Not in the bigs.
And your manager hasn't been a manager in the bigs either.
Correct. So everything's, discussion is open for everything.
But not Tony Vitello.
Well, no, of course it's open for Tony Vitello, but I'm not ready to start talking about a firing. That's a little bit less of an A to B job.
Right.
The manager thing is not, I don't get that direct result to what you're doing as often. And by the way, I would argue that a lot of what we've seen on the field is sort of in spite of Tony. But you're allowed to disagree with that. I just think you're an organization right now that from the inside out, everybody is really edgy right now, and everybody is sort of struggling to find trust in one another. And this is one of those key subject matters. No, Hector Borg is not the biggest problem on the Giants, but he's representative right now of the biggest problem on the Giants. It feels very Bush League. And I don't
across the board.
Well, you could argue that.
You've got your third baseman barking at your first baseman to catch the bleeping ball.
I don't think that's Bush League. I think that happens in every major league clubhouse.
I'm just going to lay out the things that I think are Bush League, and that would be one of them. You've got no closer, and so you try a guy, and he's not it, so he gets optioned to AAA. That's fine. You still don't have a closer. You bring in two journeymen to be the back end of your rotation, and Hauser's getting better, but Malley's the worst pitcher in baseball. That's kind of a Bush League offseason, if you ask me. You got guys pelvic thrusting each other after victories. Ask your boy Will Clark how he feels about those shenanigans. You're a losing team. You're pelvic thrusting each other. You're yelling at each other. You don't know how many outs there are. Your closer gets optioned, and now we're going to whack the third base coach because he's having a bad start.
Yes.
Well, that's just another thing that's Bush League.
But while I think you have some points in there, those things are not all equal, and they're not all coming from the same starting block.
No, but the same manager is the guy who is presiding over all of it.
No doubt. And I think that a learning curve at that position was predictable, but at the same time, that's a different position. And those errors are less egregious to me. I mean, the hip thrusting, that's sort of that's not even on the field. Tyler Malley's sucking, that is on the field. There's physical mistakes, there's mental mistakes. And by the way, I already said on the crossover, I'd make a move on him too. If I got what I'm hoping for Tony Vitello tomorrow at about 3:30 when he meets the media in the dugout, I hope he is asked about the starting rotation beyond the Rockies series, and I hope he is empowered to say Trevor McDonald will be making his start. Tyler Malley will not. We'll see where that goes. He's either going to the bullpen. We're figuring that out. And Ron Wotus is coaching third tonight. Those are, I'm not saying they're the only moves. Those are the first two.
Well, I mean, tonight, you mean going forward?
Tomorrow night, yes.
I mean, you're not just going to have the guy sit sit for a game.
Who?
You're not going to have Hector Borg just sit out a game.
No.
You're going to make the move, and he's going to get sent wherever he gets sent. Hopefully, for his sake, it's no longer with the major league club, because that's kind of embarrassing when you get demoted and now you're going to be the assistant to the assistant general manager on the bench.
I don't think it's any more embarrassing than what happened on the field yesterday. I really don't.
Well, that's embarrassing, but that's a guy making a mistake. And we can forgive Willie Adames' mistakes because he's making $180 million.
That's life.
And yeah, the third base coach is making mistakes.
That's life. And by the way, they're worse mistakes. Like I can't even describe to everybody in the big leagues what that is like when you are down by a run in the 8th inning and you're sending someone who hasn't arrived at third base yet while the ball is already traveling to the infield with your best hitter on deck. Like, honestly, I know people are going to get super mad at this. That's way worse than forgetting how many outs there are. Forgetting how many outs there are is an inexcusable mental error,
mistake.
But it happens. I've never seen what I saw yesterday. That's the craziest bad send I think I've ever seen in my life watching baseball. It was the easiest, no doubter, stay right here moment that you could possibly imagine. And he didn't even blink. Right. He did the opposite.
He made the call in real time, and he told you back in February he's aggressive.
That's not
and
aggressive.
That was aggressive. That was overly aggressive. And so, yeah, you've got a situation where if Tony V's unhappy, he probably doesn't have the authority to just straight up make the move. You got to get on the phone and ask the bosses, and because they love him, he's in the organization, Hector Borg, and so you can't just sit the guy down and say, you're not coaching third anymore. And that is part of the problem. Tony Vitello's got to run a lot of this up the flagpole and, get permission to do things.
I agree with you, but don't you feel like that's kind of how it is now? Are there any managers in baseball that could just unilaterally do that without even, no conversation with baseball ops, with GMs?
With a third base coach?
Yeah, or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's like Tony Vitello can't be like, we're sending Will Brennan down.
Well, he's probably getting sent, but you're right.
I mean, he might, right? But you can't do that. We can't send Tyler Mahle to the bullpen. You got to talk to people.
Right.
So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is if Tony were to, in an impassioned way, right now, as we speak, it's 3:50 in Colorado, and he's in Buster's hotel room, and he's begging him, I got to have a new third base coach tomorrow. And Buster says no. Then I'd have an issue. Because Tony is absolutely, he needs that power, and he would be in the right.
Yeah, I mean, he would be in the right, but the guy's only 2 months on the job. So for me, if you're going to talk about getting rid of a third base coach after 2 months and he is struggling, then the manager is not necessarily going to be safe at the end of the year. And I'm just looking at the Kalshi markets. I love to check it. And gone by December 1st, Tony Vitello, 17% chance. So just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's very, very low.
It's not very, very low. Like Dave Roberts is at 6. There's a bunch of guys below him. He's right in the middle. Carlos Mendoza of the Mets, 96% chance. He's gone before December 1. Yeah. You got Hinch and Dan Wilson in Seattle. These guys are above 50%. 17% Tony Vitello.
I don't disagree with what you're saying if the world was all fair, but it's not. Tony's the manager. Hector Borg's just a third base coach. That's different.
It's different, but at the same time, he's also new to the gig. Yeah. And you could say he cost him the game yesterday. Well, we don't know that.
No, I don't know that he cost him.
You might have back-to-back strikeouts and you still lose.
I'm taking it solely on the surface of what I saw yesterday and have seen at least 5 to 7 other times this year.
I'll give you 5.
Yeah.
Probably 5 either bad stops or bad sends.
Again, have you ever talked about a third base coach this much in your life?
Matt Williams.
Really?
I mean, was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, there was a discussion. It was never this.
I'd have to look up how many he had, but he had it was a year where it was it might have been last year where it's oh my God.
It didn't feel this intense, though. I don't think.
Well, it's this intense because this guy is brand new. Yep. We don't know who he is. Matt Williams gets a certain amount of legendary benefit of the doubt, as did Pat Burrell last year, hitting coach. We talked a lot about, I got to get rid of the hitting coach. Well, I mean, the hitting coach, he's not the one out there swinging and missing at fastballs.